Awesome. Well, I'll start introducing myself. I expect we'll have a few more people trickle in both online and in person. My name is Pearl Sullivan. I lead community engagement for the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, which basically, for all intents and purposes, means that I'm part of the glue between industry, education and training programs, and people to make sure that there are strong pathways to jobs in the life sciences. Thank you so much for coming to the Career Development Network. This is a monthly series that we do focused on resources and tips that are helpful as you're looking for a job. It's led by Susan Langford. And so massive shout out to her for this session. As many of y'all know, we do have mock interviews today, which first of all, we are full, but if we do end up with some open spots, you're welcome to sign up for waitlists. We will have 2 more sessions of mock interviews after this for those in person. But definitely kind of having some folks trickle in, trickle out as part of that. I will say, just as a housekeeping before we get started, this is a hybrid event. That does mean it will be recorded. That recording will be sent to everybody who is registered. Additionally, the slides that I go through really quickly before we get started with our panel will be shared with everybody as well. This does mean, though, that folks online can only hear you if you talk into a microphone. So we will have time for questions, but please do take a second to wait for one of my colleagues to get to you with a mic before you say something. So with that, going to run through a couple of things before we introduce our panel. First, let's see if it goes. There we go. First, I want to give a massive thank you to the North Carolina CRO Collaborative and my colleague Marty Jones, who's in the back, who helps lead that. This is an initiative comprised of academic institutions, clinical sites, clinical research organizations, and supporting partners that are focused on the clinical research industry. So we partnered with them on this event. That's why if you signed up for a mock interview, we asked if you were interested in clinical research. We also have Denise from the Duke Clinical Research Team to talk about that perspective as well today on the panel. So just a massive thank you to the CRO Collaborative. I do think I was told to mention that graphic is likely out of date, so please, if you don't see yourself there, we promise you're going to be on there soon. So a couple of resources that we want to talk about that can be helpful if you're looking for a job. First, on NCBiotech's website, it's on the homepage, it's easy to find. It's our careers and training site. So everything I talk about in the next 5 minutes is on this website. It's a great resource. We kind of tried to make it a one-stop shop for everything you might need as you're looking for a job in the life sciences in North Carolina. So we have, jobs, we have career kind of pages where you can see what is the job title, what is the experience required, what is the education required, what is the average pay, the median pay that we're seeing for these roles in the state. Different training opportunities. We have a page, it took forever, but of every relevant training program in North Carolina for any career in the life sciences. And then, of course, events and networking opportunities, which is what I'll be focusing on today. Additionally, if you haven't explored our Career Center, you really should. It's new and improved. It's excellent. It's like your LinkedIn, your Indeed. We do scrape all of our life sciences companies here in the state for every single job they're posting in North Carolina. We also have a talent network as part of the Career Center. The Talent Network enables you, especially for some of our smaller companies, to both get emails when there are relevant jobs posted, but also companies can go in and say, I'm looking for somebody with this type of experience. How do I connect to them? The fun thing for me is I get an email anytime somebody gets a job through the Talent Network. So if you join, it makes my day. But a great resource here, I will say I'm on this every single day for work, finding jobs. So definitely know it's easy to navigate and overall a great site. So moving into the company directory, which hopefully some of y'all are aware of. I was recently talking to my colleagues who lead this. This is something that's been around. We've had it for like at least 25 years. It's every single life sciences site in the state. So there are over 860 life sciences companies here in North Carolina. If you go to the company directory, you will see over 1,000 results. And that's because, for example, Eli Lilly has a site here in RTP as well as in Concord. So we want to make sure we have all of those details. This is really relevant when you think about our major kind of large employers, right? These are global national, it's a long day, multinational corporations. And so, they're making many different things. And so being able to go in and see not only what is this company like, how many employees and a range do they have at this site? Where is the site? What's near me if I'm looking for a job? But also can go in and see what are they doing at this specific site. So as you're going into interviews, you're not saying, well, I really like that Johnson & Johnson as a company exists. You're saying, I'm applying to this job with J&J in Wilson, and here's what they make here, and here's why that's interesting to me. It's also just a really cool resource to see kind of maps, what else is in the region. So I mentioned that the Career Development Network is a monthly session. We'll get an email about this later this week, hopefully. But we did just finalize this morning our next session. It will be on April 15th, and that text is pretty small. With Nellie Scott. Nellie Scott spoke last year about optimizing your career search, focusing on how do you perfect your elevator pitch, which you'll hear about from our panel today, as well as relationship building, how do you network effectively. As you're looking for your next job. And I will tell y'all, like, complete transparency, last year we were planning these and Susan was like, Nellie's amazing. And I was like, cool, I don't know what optimizing your career search means. I don't know what a personal marketing plan is. Like, we'll see what this is. And it was like by far my favorite session of the year last year. Learned a ton. Nellie is wonderful. And also just was such a big part of my job is networking, and I came out of that session understanding it in a different way and approaching it in a different way. So definitely recommend. You can scan that QR code to sign up. And then I will say as well, we do have a link down there. Again, these slides will be shared, but all of our sessions are recorded. So those recordings are on our YouTube page along with the slides. I do want to do a flag for our exchange groups. So if you're here in the Triangle Biotech Tuesday is a wonderful resource you might have taken advantage of in the past. It's a networking group. Similarly, we've got Women in Bio. I think some of you might have interviewed with Julianne Bove. She's on the executive board of Women in Bio here in North Carolina. Additionally, we have more specific groups. So you've got ACRP up there if you're interested in clinical research, focusing in on that industry specifically. So great way to network, a great way to learn more about what's happening. There are 29 groups. You can find them all online by going to the NCBiotech Exchange Group space. And if you're virtual and in other parts of the state, we do have strong exchange groups across the state as well. All right. Some of you might have heard this joke before, and if you have, please pretend you hadn't. But in all honesty, I'm trying to get off Instagram. I spend way too much time on Instagram. My phone last year told me I was spending like 5 hours a day on my phone. And so I'm trying to get off Instagram. And what that's meant is at the end of last year, I had been active for 350 days on LinkedIn. So I've just replaced the time, but this is good for you all because the NC Life Sciences Career Community is a LinkedIn group that we have. It is over 3,000 members, all of whom are students, job seekers, yes, but also instructors, business leaders, professionals in the life sciences in North Carolina. It's a great resource for networking. But additionally, as I said, I'm on LinkedIn far too much. And that means that any open job I see, any training opportunity I see, any career resource, any event gets reshared to this group. So really try to make it kind of a one-stop shop for anything that's happening that is helpful. I will also say I'm going to call Jordan out here because it makes me very happy. Jordan is with Biogen. You'll hear from her soon, but it's one of those where we've now reached the point where companies and hiring managers and talent acquisition folks are tagging the profile that we have to run this group to say, hey, we're hiring for this role, we're sharing this role. So really try to make sure that it is a resource. Again, we've got a QR code up there if you would like to join. Finally, this is more relevant for entry-level folks, I'll be honest, but we do send a bi-weekly email called The Dish. It has upcoming events that are relevant for job seekers, as well as any open entry-level job posted in the last week in all regions of the state. So this is something that I and my colleagues do spend a good amount of time on. We are manually pulling those jobs, and so do try to make sure it is relevant as people are looking for stuff. And to that end, if you got The Dish this week, you'll recognize this. Here is a list of upcoming events across the state that may be relevant if you're looking for things. One thing I will flag here is on April 21st, the BioNetwork Career Fair is happening here at NCBiotech. That is an event that is open to the public. Many of our major life sciences manufacturing employers come to that. So if you're interested in that role, again, that does not mean that you're necessarily applying for an operator role. You can be applying for any type of job at those companies. They will likely be here that. If you're in Charlotte, the Health Innovation Day event is at the Pearl, which is coincidentally named for me. Okay, I've just run through a bunch of stuff and I talk relatively fast. Jules missed my Women in Bio shout out just for you. Does anybody have any questions before we jump into our panel? I know that's why we're all here today. Incredible. So with that, I am going to very briefly introduce our panelists. They will be introducing themselves. I do have one note before I introduce them. You'll see this QR here. You probably can't read that text. Jordan very kindly sent us a QR for the Biogen talent community. So if you have applied for a role at Biogen, if you are interested in applying for a role at Biogen in the future, you can scan this QR code. It will bring you to a page specifically for the Career Development Network event today. And you will be able to join the talent network. It'll ask you for some of your details. And if you've applied for a job, you can also see it in the back if that QR is easier to read, because my chairs are blocking this. And I will send this link out as well. It will, if you've applied for a job at Biogen, it will also flag your registration to that application. So definitely a great resource. And with that, I'm going to introduce our panelists. So first up, we have Denise Snyder, who is the Associate Dean for Clinical Research at Duke University. I then have Gina Thompson, who's our Head of Growth and Transformation at Muscata. And finally, Jordan Teach, the Talent Acquisition Site Lead for Biogen. I will say we are going to go through a few questions here. We will absolutely have time for audience questions. Again, please wait for one of my colleagues to run you a mic. And we will also, if you are online, please feel free to put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, excuse me, and we will see them. And my colleague Marty is tracking those as well. So with that, over here. All right, y'all still hear me? Yes. So wanted to get started kind of with all of you. If you could describe your career journeys and how you got to your current role, what that is. Denise, you want to start?
Okay, in brief, because it isn't, I think we were talking about how it's not a winding path. It is a winding path. And I always start off with a career is a lifetime. Okay, so don't rush whatever it is that you're doing or whatever job you're in, because something else may come up and you just don't know what that's going to look like. But from a background standpoint, I'm a dietitian. I got my graduate degree at Penn State and moved to North Carolina, worked in public health, and had been trying to get a job at Duke as a dietitian. Couldn't get my foot in the door. So I worked at Moses Cone for 2 years as a clinical dietitian, and then I was at a meeting, networking, very important. And I bumped into a Penn State colleague, and she was like, "What are you doing now?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm working in clinical. I miss research, from being a grad student." She said, "Well, I know somebody at Duke that's looking for somebody who has your background, right? So you just never know." So I took that job. It was a coordinator job at Duke. And if you had told me I would still be at Duke, I would have said, no way. There's no way I'm staying there. I'm going to go do my PhD. That's my next step. But I took a step back while I was at Duke and recognized that there was a real big hole in a lot of our operations. And we were rinse and repeating of people. Like people were walking out the door and we're losing institutional knowledge. So created a team when I was in the School of Nursing. And that team actually ended up taking on some data projects and became the home for REDCap, which you probably all know. So this is like 2008, 2009. And in 2012, I was asked to come take that job, make it a little bigger, and take on research support for all of Duke University and the School of Medicine. And so that's what I did. And now we have an Office of Clinical Research known as the Duke Office of Clinical Research. I've been at Duke now 26 years, 14 of them in this role. And it's allowed me to really grow the operations and the things that we do around clinical research. And I feel like I have boots on the ground experience. So I have some level of street credentialing, right? Like people really think that's cool that you have some credit in. Also, I have clinical background, right? So being a dietitian. So even though that didn't happen specifically at Duke, it's certainly transformed our research enterprise. And now I have a community of CRPs, clinical research professionals, and they're about 800 plus strong at Duke. And we have collaborations with NCBiotech, with Durham Tech. I see Charlene here in the audience, and NCCU. So it's an expansive world. You don't know where your career is going to take you. So I'll hand it off to Gina.
Great, thank you. My name is Gina Thompson. I am head of growth and transformation at Muscata. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so I was excited when oh goodness, that's what I was hoping when I hear Penn State, even though it's not right in Pittsburgh. I got my master's degree and undergraduate degree from Duquesne University in health management systems, and never thought I would be in the life sciences industry. I was commuting from Pittsburgh to here for, goodness, maybe 15 years with a company. We were doing digital healthcare records. And at one point said, goodness, I've got to go down there with the sweet tea and Bojangles and banana pudding, and forgive me for not coming down here much sooner. So I've been down here for about 20 years, stayed with the company for quite some time through several mergers and acquisitions, always leading people and the consulting team, the project managers, the integration specialist, and took a few turns here and there with some personal things that were going on with my family that I wanted to support. And recently went over to Muscata. Here in the role, I'm basically responsible for taking automation, data, and strategy in the life sciences manufacturing industry and helping support organizations as they grow, they expand, they transform, they bring in a little bit of automation, they bring in a lot of digital automation, and have loved being here for some time. I'm also involved heavily with some of the organizations here, the North Carolina Life Science Apprenticeship Consortium. I'm responsible for the recruiting, and also involved with ISPE, CASA, there's a local chapter here. Try to get involved in as much as possible, because after I moved here and I got into the life sciences industry, I thought, my gosh, I was at Allscripts. It was Medic, then Mysis, then Allscripts 2.0. They were constantly merging, buying, and selling off. And I thought, I've been with the company for 18 years. How am I ever going to get a network as strong as that after 18 years in one industry with one company? And I joined Corber Pharma back in 2020, right when the pandemic started, and thought, I've got to dive in and network and make some connections. And I did that through all the supporting organizations that we have here, especially through NCBiotech Center, and really have built a strong network in the past 6 years that I never thought I would be able to go ahead and compare with an 18-year, career in health and life sciences. So excited to be here today and help you all navigate as you consider changing careers and interviewing.
Awesome. And hi, everyone. My name is Jordan Teach. I'm a talent acquisition site lead at Biogen. And as we stated earlier, a lot of careers are not in a straight line or in a straight road. And I'm intentionally bringing that up in this space because I think a lot of you are in this mode of what is next. You're in a mode of discovery and learning and self-reflecting. And it is perfectly okay to be in this space, and is actually a really great space to learn and grow. So again, how my not straight line of a career began. I graduated from Western Michigan University, so I'm from the Midwest, with a bachelor's of fine arts with a focus in marketing. And even my academic career was not a straight line. I did 3 years in marketing, had a horrible semester, changed my major, did a victory lap, and after 5 years, graduated from Western with a BFA. After I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was in the mode of flexing my degree, doing photography. But after a couple months, I realized this is probably not what I want to do for a career. And I was very lucky. I had a mentor who was in the life science preclinical space. So she helped develop and coach me. And after a year after graduation, I got an interview and an offer to join a preclinical life sciences organization as an administrative assistant. So I had experience in human resources, security, safety, health and environment. And for a year, I dove into those 3 departments. And at the end of the year, I was able to select where I wanted to go next. I found a lot of passion in human resources and talent acquisition, which then led me into 5 years of managing a ton of high volume hiring for a life sciences organization. And I had a large focus in community outreach, doing talks like this, and helping bridge those in the job seeking market to roles at my organization. So after 5 years, I did transition and I moved here to Raleigh, North Carolina, and I stayed in recruiting, but I switched to recruitment consulting, which gave me a ton of visibility into different industries and a lot of different projects. So again, I still managed and helped support full life cycle recruiting, but I also was helping advise my clients' main stakeholders on process, launching recruiting teams, the gambit basically. I also managed teams that were not only in North America, but in APAC and EMEA. And these industries that they supported were preclinical. It was also space launch, which is going to be in the aerospace and defense sector. And then lastly, it also supported the food and beverage industry. And while I loved consulting, I did it for 7 years. I wanted to come back to in-house recruiting because I love making those connections and helping, again, bridge those gaps and hire directly from my organization. So 5 months ago, I joined Biogen as the TA site lead. So what does that mean? I actually live in 2 different verticals. So again, similar to my first job, it's networking like this, helping bridge the job-seeking market to roles at Biogen. The other half is I'm listening to the business. I'm working with our SLT members, looking to understand what they're hiring for and what their hiring needs are, and I'm help advising and navigating our recruiting team on how to meet those needs. So I see a couple of very familiar faces because I think I've met a couple of you through a couple of networking events as of late. But again, I'll be someone at Biogen that's participating in these events, and it's great to meet you all.
Thank you all. So we'll start on the other side this time. To kick us off kind of into thinking about interviews, what is the single most important thing a candidate can do before walking into an interview for a role in your field? And what do most people skip? And I'll go to Jordan.
Well, I went slightly rogue, but not crazy. So I wanted to take a little bit of a step back and reframe this question just slightly. So what's most important for a candidate that they can do in the beginning of their application and interview journey, and what do they skip the most? So there's actually 2 topics that I feel that are missed. I'm not saying that they don't happen. They usually happen along their journey. I'm just trying to help you all save time at the end of the day. So the first is being self-reflective. The second is going to be acting as if your job application process and interview process is your full-time job. So to start with your self-reflective moment is as you're looking to change careers or get into industry, whatever that may be, you need to take a moment and understand what are your motivators. So like questions that could come up is, what type of work actually genuinely interests you? Do you want to go to a job every day that you enjoy the work on, or are you okay with anything? The second piece, which is really important in life sciences, and I think in biotech as well, is what shifts and schedules are you comfortable with? We're talking in biotech and at Biogen 365 days, 24/7. So we have first shift, second shift, nights. You can be on call, you can have rotating schedules, and all of the different roles vary. But again, self-reflect and understand what you're going to be really comfortable in, just knowing the needs of the industry you're going into. Another one could be, do you thrive in structure, or do you like having more flexibility? Another thing is, do you want to be boots on the ground and hands-on, like working with a bioreactor, or do you want to be working at a computer? So again, I think a lot of individuals in this space, they ultimately come to this self-reflecting moment, but it's usually months into the process. So I'm requesting and advising that you do this from the very beginning. The second piece is going to be acting as if this process is your own job. So you're using this time as if it's a full-time opportunity, because the effort that you put into the job search directly is what's going to impact the outcome. So if you sporadically apply, that usually does not land where you want to be. Not saying it doesn't happen, but again, I would advise that as you're going through this journey, take the time, invest the effort, and again, go through these steps as if it's your full-time job.
Just to play on that, prepare. That's the one word that sticks to my head is you have to prepare, right? So take your resume and take the job description that you're applying for and match it so that you can tell the story before you go in. Don't read from the resume, in 1996, now I'm dating myself. In 1996, I was an intern for XYZ. Tell the story of, I had an internship and this is what it did. And this is how I see it's applicable to the job that I'm applying for today. And just as we're kind of telling our journey and story, do the same. Take the interviewer through what your journey has been over the past few years. You don't have to go into every single detail. That's why you want to compare your resume to the job description to say, what can I skip? I only have a certain period of time with this, interviewer. What do I need to hit on? What do I need to make relevant? And how do I go ahead and tell the story so that they understand why I'm the right person for this job?
Okay, they've left nothing for me to say. No, I'm just kidding. So I emphasize I actually agree with both of them. Do your homework, be prepared. I think one of the other things, it's just more of a career advice thing, is many of you may be transitioning, right? You're trying to find something new because you're coming out of something else. So thinking about transferable skills, and that's kind of that mapping to like, what's that job looking for? I think that's really important. One of the things I do, because I've kept track of a nearly 30-some year career, is I create a timeline. I have a timeline slide. And I keep adding to that timeline slide things that I've done along the way that that I would say are career points. I also have one that has like personal points in timelines, right? Had a baby, got married, in reverse. But you know, those types of things are actually, those personal drivers help people understand your resume a little bit better too. And so if you have that story in mind, kind of to what Gina's saying, if you have that in mind already, it's easier to talk about when somebody asks you a question. So it's just a matter of organizing. And that's why I love my timeline slide, and I get a lot of compliments on my timeline slide because they're like, wow, that's really interesting. You actually worked in basic science. I did when I was an undergrad and decided I didn't really love working with animals, right? So you rule out these things along the way, and that really dovetails into what Jordan is saying, which is, you know, you've really got to think about, what do you want right now? Because that determines whether or not you're a good fit for that job. You do not want to take a job just to have a job. There are lots of those kinds of jobs. Career jobs are a little bit different because that's a big decision, right? And you're taking somebody's time, and you're going to have onboarding and training and all those kinds of things. So be really serious about that prep work that she mentioned, because you've got to go and figure out, how much flexibility do I need? You know, how available can I be? How flexible can I be? Because things can change. We saw that last year, some substantial changes in funding, and it has created an environment of like having to change rapidly and be very nimble. So.
Thank you all so much. So I'm going to jump into some questions for each of you individually. First, from Gina, wanted to know if you could give an example of a behavioral question you commonly use when you're interviewing people, and what a strong answer sounds like, and what you're not looking for in those answers.
Great. Real quick too, I wanted to just add on to this. When you do that timeline and what Jordan was saying, and I promise you, we literally have just met each other for the first time 5 minutes before this started. We did not rehearse. It's so self-reflective for you to look at it yourself before you're interviewing, and you're saying, oh, A, I've accomplished a lot. B, I could tell myself, what do I want to do, right? It's not even just for that interview process. It's also for that self-reflection that Jordan was saying. So one of the things that I always like to ask is, and I'm more on the people side where, technically you can say all the abbreviations of the automation, the BMS, the MES, the PLCs. It's all over my head. I want to know how you're going to interact with our team, because it's all going to be about teamwork and how you're going to be able to pivot when there's a difficult time that comes around. So I ask a lot of behavioral questions. And when I do that, I bring in the subject matter experts, the technical folks, to ask the hard technical questions that I may not get. So I always want to know, how do you handle, something that brings on a very uncomfortable conversation with a teammate, or that you're going to have to force some change management? Because those are things that, regardless of what industry you're in, you need to be nimble, you need to be flexible and agile to be able to adjust to the situation that's around you. So that's one of the things I always say is, tell me about a difficult time that you experienced in a project, or, I make sure it's very relevant to some of the experience that they have said and they have told me about. And so the one thing I don't want to hear is buzzwords. Everybody knows a buzzword. Tell me, what does that mean? Tell me in real words exactly what the issue was, how you recognized it, and what you did to go ahead and address it. Doesn't mean you have to have solved it. I want to know, how did you react during that particular situation? And that's going to tell me how you'll be able to, play nice in the sandbox with everybody.
Thank you, Gina. So one of the things, I think Susan and I have talked about this, between ourselves, I guess, a lot, is in planning these sessions over the last year, we've seen a lot of people coming from quote unquote non-life sciences backgrounds, right? Whether that's due to the federal changes or just kind of looking for something new. So Jordan, you've done a lot of interviews throughout your career. And so I wanted to know, for candidates who might not have that direct life sciences experience, that's kind of a clear point A to point B, how can they talk about their experiences in a way that makes them competitive?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's something that I've coached a ton of candidates on, because to start this is we have to define what direct experience is versus relevant experience. So direct experience, if I'm hiring for a manufacturing associate at Biogen and they're a level 3 or 4, they need to have cell culture experience. They need either upstream or downstream experience, media prep experience. That's going to be very direct experience that you have to get from industry. The relevant side of the house is going to be a lot of the things that you've already done. It's just, again, helping bridge that relevant experience and how it's going to be applicable to the role itself. So there's actually a couple of steps that I always kind of advise individuals to go through. The first is again, focus on your relevant skills. So who here has managed a project, has been self-driven, who has attention to detail, who communicates well, who has done presenting? These are all relevant skills. And that is something that's always going to be applicable to any role that you apply with. It's just how you articulate it in your discussion and how you articulate it in your resume and in your application. The next is tell a clear story. My next question after this is going to be talking about an elevator pitch. So that is going to be part of this telling a very clear story. Instead of reading your resume and saying, this date and time, I had this title, it's telling the story of that relevant experience and how it, again, bridges over to the role itself. Another is being able to articulate the desire to learn, grow, and develop. So I'm sure all of you at some point had a job where you've had to learn, or you've been in a regulated environment, or you've had process that you've had to follow. Being able to articulate how you took that challenge on, learned and grew through that process, and then again, came out on the other side is super important, especially for a company like Biogen, which we are highly regulated with CGMP, again, bridging that relevancy. And then lastly, it's also going to be connecting your interest and your integrity and your career goals with industry. So again, at Biogen, we're very focused on patient safety. We're doing a ton of quality and compliance and risk mitigation. So at the end of the day, we are looking for those who want to align with impacting human beings long-term for the better. And again, align your interests and your career goals with this. Again, that's going to go a long way. So please, please, please don't just focus on the experience that you do not have. A lot of people reflectively go into that headspace. Always make sure that you're looking at your valuable and relevant experience and bringing that forward. Don't focus on what you don't have.
So we do have a number of folks from the clinical research background or interested in clinical research today. And one of the things we often hear about from our partners in that space is that a clinical research interview looks a little bit different than your interviews in other sectors or parts of the life sciences. So Denise, could you tell us about how those interviews differ and what to expect if you're in that space?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting, I can't say that I've interviewed for anything else, right? Yeah, so, but there are a couple of things that I will always say in any interview that I hope that you bring to that. And it's, how do you show grit and gracefulness? There are two characteristics that I would say my team looks for. I don't want the superstar who thinks that they're better than everybody else on the team. We're not going to get things done. I've had plenty of amazing staff who have great skills, but guess what? They don't play well in the sandbox. So we're going to be looking for people who actually can put other people in front of themselves. That doesn't mean we don't care about work-life balance. But it's really important to us to understand that our patients and our participants are our primary customers, if you will. And those people matter every single day. And then your colleagues that you're working alongside that you've got to, rally around a project or whatever are the other people that you have to interact with and understand. We deal with a lot of personalities that are pretty important, right? People who are faculty. That's a different dynamic, right? So you have to be able to come into that environment and understand you're going to have direct interactions with all types of people. And you're not going to necessarily always know where somebody's coming from. Right. So I think that is why I think clinical research interviews are going to feel a little bit different, especially if you're going to be a boots on the ground coordinator type of individual, because you're going to be interfacing with all of those types, those character types that I mentioned and personality types. Then you layer in a manager and you layer in, just HR or financial, things that are happening. So there's a lot that goes to sort of being somebody who can actually operationalize their life, their work life in that clinical research realm. It's a dynamic environment. It's an exciting environment. I always say, research is care, and we talk about it a lot. But when I was a dietitian, I worked with breast cancer patients. And that was a long time ago. That was before I was a coordinator. And this is in New York City. And if we had somebody came in with stage 4 breast cancer, we pretty much helped them understand what was happening, knew that as a dietitian, there was nothing I could really do. And there was very little the medical world could do at that point. Those women, and at the time, I'd only seen women with breast cancer. Those women were sent home, and a lot of them were young. They had young families, they had friends, people that they weren't ready to hear that, right? So understanding that world 30 some years ago, I was trying to do the math today, it's probably 36 years ago, 35 years ago, I was working in the city. So, and New York City is what I mean by that. And so, flash forward to where we are today. If you're diagnosed with the stage 4 breast cancer, you might actually have a chance to treat that like a chronic disease. That's impactful. That means we've made tremendous progress, and we've made progress because of everything that Biogen and other pharmaceuticals have really said, okay, we're going to dig into this. We're going to come up with another drug. And that's in partnership with a lot of thought leaders and clinicians who have, again, the boots on the ground experience with patients, right? And they want to fight for a new therapy, new options. Because what works for one individual doesn't necessarily work for the next individual. And that's why we have lots and lots of clinical trials. So just understanding the perspective of research as care, because it is often not just the last ditch option, right? A lot of times it's actually the option that we have for you that might be better than the standard of care. And understanding that standard of care just keeps moving. Right? We keep evolving it and it just keeps getting better. So we're looking for people who can actually work in that environment, and our questions are going to drive into, what do you know about us? Right? What have you reviewed on the website? What do you know about this job? Do you actually recognize it's not a job that you're going to be sitting at your desk all day? That doesn't mean we don't have those jobs in clinical research. It just means the coordinator job is definitely a patient-facing one. So, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so this is your, 5-minute warning in the audience. We're about to come to audience questions. But I am going to do a real quick, rapid fire. What is one piece of advice that you have for someone preparing for an interview? Whoever wants to start.
I can go. So show of hands here. Who knows what an elevator pitch is? Awesome. Who is brave enough to shout out really fast what they view as an elevator pitch? Again, no right or wrong answer here. Anyone?
2 or 3 minute
your background and what you're looking for. Jordan, can you repeat that? Yeah, so for those online, it was stated it's like a 2 to 3 minute like pitch of what you're looking for and why you're good for the job. So the way that I always view an elevator pitch is best described through a scenario. So imagine you're downtown Raleigh, you're out to dinner, and you just happen to strike a conversation with the table next to you. I'm personally an introvert. This would not happen, but just to say theoretically. And through this like light banter, you find out that the person at the table next to you is at Biogen, and they're even better, they're in quality. That's the space you want to break into. And so throughout dinner, again, your entrees come, dessert comes, and then just happenstance, the tab comes for both tables at the same time. So you both pay at the same time and you leave. Both tables are walking to the elevator. And in this moment, you are assessing that you have 1 to 2 minutes before the elevator arrives, and then you're riding the elevator down to the parking garage. So how are you quickly pitching your interest in the company and making that network there? So a couple of things is with your elevator pitch, it takes time and practice, and it changes throughout your career. My elevator pitch when I first started, admittedly, it was horrible, but my elevator pitch in the very beginning is not how it is today. And with your elevator pitch, it goes back to the self-reflection, and that's another like full circle moment. The only other piece I quickly want to bring forward is the networking piece. So again, you're having this conversation. It's part of the elevator pitch with this individual that's an employee at a company you want to work for. You all are also networking today. Like this is another amazing step that you need to take in order to make those connections and help bridge, again, your job search into a career. So again, elevator pitch, get that ready, and network.
I'm going to answer the question with a question. So when I'm interviewing somebody and I'm a little bit unorthodox because I want to stand out, I always say to the person, what's the one thing, right? We've gone through all the questions. They've heard about the position. I feel like it's going well, so I'm going to take it all the way through. What is the one thing about you that I should remember that makes you the right fit for this job? And so I would even take that elevator pitch and shrink it to, a 3 or 4, 5, 6 word sentence that you stand out in their mind at the end that says, I remember Gina. She had that crazy polka dot outfit on. And she told me that while she didn't have agile project management experience, she led a project at XYZ. And you have to be very agile to deal with those resources on that project team. So this is a good time to sell yourself without sounding like a used car salesman. But to be able to stand out to, remember, because we're getting a lot of resumes, we're doing a lot of interviews, and you want to stand out from the other candidates.
Well, I'm going to stick to my grit and gracefulness because I feel like I offered that advice a few minutes ago. So anyway, I don't want to drone on. I want to take questions.
Love it. Okay. So audience questions, we will have Chase on that side and Susan on this side running with a mic. If you have a question, raise your hand and we will get a mic to you. I've got down here with Diane, Susan.
What is your advice for somebody that is a more veteran person applying for jobs and switching careers?
That directed at me. Any of us. Well, we have lots of examples where this has gone pretty well. Particularly anybody who, I had a school nurse come to me and say, I'm really interested in coming to the Durham area. My husband is moving to the Durham area, that kind of thing, some kind of personal connection, right? I didn't know her at all. And I said, well, gosh, nurses, we always need nurses in research. So those are very easily transferable skills. Even if you don't have a day of work in research, you can take that clinical and other like job skills like that, all those things that you're good at that someone coming right out of college is actually not good at. That can be really, really something to really portray and convey in an interview about your ability to, like, you have some know-how, all of those seasoned veteran, if you will, things about working, because what you want to be careful of, I think, is that you don't want to be so set in your ways either, that you're still very much a team player and you're willing to learn, that you don't come in, that you know it all. So those are just some things off the top of my head.
What's your opinion on like following up after interview, like thank you emails? I have heard both side of like some managers like, some don't like. And what's a good thank you email without like sounding like you're very desperate or you're trying?
Thank you. I'm not desperate, but
I actually just had this conversation with a hiring leader this week. And I do have to say, it is dependent on the person. We're all different humans. We have all different perspectives. I still would always take the chance to send a follow-up, because what happened was the hiring leader said, I haven't gotten a follow-up from a candidate in forever, and I got one, and he showed up to the interview in a suit and tie. He was prepared, he had questions, and I had a moment of, that should be kind of normal, shouldn't it be? So at the end of the day, I would suggest, again, doing a follow-up within a couple of days. Your good recruiter should tell you the timeline, but if they don't, again, just say that you're open-ended, and again, say that you're just following up and expressing continued interest. I wouldn't have it be a dissertation, but I think going back to what's the couple of words as just a reminder to keep you at front of mind through this process. What is like the main thing you want to ensure they walked away from the interview remembering about you? So that's what I would put in there. And then again, a multitude of things. Other question, there we go.
I'll direct this, Jordan, just because you touched on this earlier. For candidates that are kind of non-traditional, that are not coming with a ton of that direct experience you're talking about, how do you think, what's the best approach in terms of the resume and application to stand out as a candidate and also to kind of quickly contextualize that relevant experience?
So I'm going to bring up a term that I know a lot of people feel a lot of different ways about, but AI is a great tool. Going back to looking at the job itself and then reflecting on your resume and finding those parallels. And as I say this next piece, I'm not saying change your resume because AI told you so, but you are very easily and able to take the application and put your resume in and say what's the same and what's different. I then would focus on the what's different. If you don't have that skill, do not put it on there. That doesn't, just leave it off. But if you are like, oh, I forgot to reference XYZ, add it in so it best reflects and compares to the application. So that's number one. Number two, networking is so unbelievably important, because this is where if you meet a hiring manager or someone in talent acquisition or just somebody who has a connection within an organization, the moment you apply, reach out and say, hey, I applied to this role. X, Y, and Z is why I applied and think I'd be great for this opportunity. I know this doesn't mean I go to the next step, but I just want to bring my name forward. So I think the second piece of that is just making those connections. We're a very tight-knit community here. Somebody always knows someone at some point. So I, again, do that comparison and again, continue networking. It's one of the easiest ways to get your name in front of people.
And join us next month to learn about how to network most effectively.
Hello, I don't know if there's like a limit to questions, but I have like 4. And one was kind of piggybacking off of what he said, because like as somebody who's actively like looking for my next job, I've applied to quite a few, some being at Biogen.
You can connect after.
But how do you get beyond the just applying? Because this area is so saturated. A lot of us have just been laid off about 3 weeks ago. So a lot of us are still applying for those same jobs. How do you get beyond that? And it's kind of like also what you just mentioned, like I used to tell people like, I worked for Merck and I was like really good at like connecting with people. And I'm like, use LinkedIn. If people reach out to me and hey, I applied to this position in Merck, I was like, all right, let me find out who the hiring manager is. And I'll like send them their email. I don't know this person, but they reached out to me on LinkedIn. Like, is that okay? Um,
Yeah.
Like, am I okay with following my own advice? So I was just,
Yes, yes.
but I have several questions. I don't know if I should keep going.
Keep going. Might as well.
That's good. Also, you mentioned earlier that you have this timeline slide. Are you willing to share said timeline slide?
I'm happy to share it. I shared it the last thing I was here for yes, I'll send you an updated one.
Thank
We'll
you.
send it out.
And then I think this is my last question. What does it look like with people using AI to help tailor their resumes? And is that detectable when you're applying to something? And if it is detectable, like, is that okay? Are people like, I don't know about this person?
Is it okay if I take that one? So Allison and I were interviewing earlier, and we were talking about how sometimes it's just hard to even get started. Like, what am I going to say for my elevator pitch? And I said, use AI. But when you use AI, don't take away that human touch. Look at it, because it probably sounds like AI and you'll sound like, a robot when you're saying it, and you can't articulate what it truly means. So let it help put together the framework for you and then massage it. And I think the thing that you have to be careful about, and I'm guilty of it, is it will take me down a rabbit hole. It will tell me, do you want to focus on this? Do you want me to do a short version? Do you want me to do a highlight to an executive sponsor? Do you want me to? And the next thing you know, for me, I'm completely overwhelmed and there's too many options. And so just be very diligent with it. Get up, walk away from it if you need to. But what you said earlier, take your own advice. You're giving good advice to others, and you need to just take a step back. Because I was in the position the summer of 2025, my position was eliminated from Kerber, and I was there for almost 6 years. And I had to apply. And I can't tell you how many applications I put through and how discouraged it was. And I thought, gosh, I have this network. And I had to remind myself that I am valuable. I bring value to the new organization that I'm at, but I've not found the right one just yet. And there's a reason why I haven't landed at something that could just be just another job for me to go ahead and take. And so do what you're doing and take a step back and believe in yourself and remind yourself, goodness, I'm a resource, and I'm mentoring and coaching people without even having a formal, LLC. I need to remind myself to go ahead and do that as well.
And I can understand the discouraging piece too, but please know sometimes it has nothing to do with your application. You may be applied the day we're offering someone and then that role is not available. So timing is really important. And I just want to reference that being active and seeing when jobs originally post and get out there like within a couple of days, those are going to be the most viable roles. So again, I know a lot of things are discouraging, but please know sometimes it has nothing to do with you and it has all to do with timing.
Thank you.
And say your elevator pitch out loud to make sure it sounds like you. I'm going to pause in person super quick just to make sure. Marty, do we have one from online we want to pull in? You want to do one for now and then we'll come back. Thank you.
So one question we have is signing an NDA a good sign that you've landed the job?
I would not sign an NDA without an offer in hand.
There we go.
The only time I had that experience is when somebody was interviewing for a highly classified government agency role and they had to do that before they went into interview. That is the only time I've seen that. It would come down to the situation, in my personal opinion.
If it feels sketchy, it's probably sketchy. Do we have one right here and then we'll go there? Yeah.
Okay, I have a question kind of piggybacking off the AI element. So in today's world, I feel as though that we're often doing the virtual interviews and just trying to capture that non-robotic element of like, oh my gosh, let me sit so still, and also formulate my words correctly. How do you capture that personal element to be able to showcase that you are adaptable, you're able to be personable and collaborative on teams?
I mean, I would say be yourself, right? Don't get in your own head where you're like, oh my goodness, do I have to wear a suit? I mean, I came here today and I was like, oh, I should wear a suit. I shouldn't wear this. And then I was like, no, this is me. This is myself. And I'm going to present myself. So I would definitely, I interviewed somebody one time and they had put a sheet in the background because they didn't have a background to put up that was, you know, kind of appropriate for a interview. And they hung a sheet behind them. Do not hang a sheet behind you in the interview. Find a place that you can go, that you have some privacy, that you can feel comfortable and feel yourself. You know, dress regardless, right? People are like, well, I just see the waist up and the thing. I need to have my pants and my heels on to be in my element when I'm doing the interview. And so I would say be yourself, try to relax, practice in front of the mirror, and then just give it a whirl.
I'd also say tell stories. I don't think we talked about that today necessarily, but there's a big difference between how do you collaborate with teams? Well, I collaborate with teams and being like, well, let me tell you about this time that I was in this group and we were working on this. And, you know, here's what happened. Here's how I felt about it. Here's the story. Because not only does that make you more of like a three-dimensional human in the conversation, it's also more memorable to have that, oh, yes, like, I remember it wasn't, well, here's what collaboration is to me. I got asked recently, what is collaboration to you? And I said, well, I've got a colleague who I'm on our work team. I've got a colleague who I'm pretty sure if it was 10 p.m. and I was 2 hours away, I could call and be like, I've got a flat tire. Can you come help? And they would come help. And that is not a definition of collaboration, but you understand what I mean by the vibe on the team, right? So like that kind of thing, I think is helpful too. Got one over, well, we've got one back there, and then Chase, do you want to run that way?
All right. Thank you for coming and giving your advice. I think with the AI, if you use it, you need to put as much information as possible about yourself before you ask it to just an AI class I'm taking right now. But my question is, if you're in an interview and you experience odd interviewer behavior, you know, like saying something like, you know, there's a panel of 4, you're on a Teams call. One person seems slightly disconnected and may say something like, well, I don't mean to throw a wet blanket on this, but I don't see it. You know, what's your recommendation like to you as the interviewer, and the other 3 stay silent? What do you how do you recommend reacting to like the person that's jacked up on coffee or tired or just acting a little off in the interview and you're right there center stage?
I would say that's a red flag. Maybe I don't want that job. Like, I'm just saying there's something not gelling about that team dynamic. Now, whether or not they're all 4 of the same level, you know, those are things you have to take into consideration. But I would like to think when I'm sitting with my managers and they're making that last sort of decision, like we've narrowed it down to these 2 candidates, Denise, but Denise actually has a rule. I want to meet everybody before they're going to become part of my team. I used to kind of just let that go, and then things just sort of drifted, I would say, away from what I would say are some of our core values. I would say that that's just, to me, a red flag if somebody's throwing around some negative language. Wet blanket is, look, I mean, I'm not saying that you got that, but.
I did get it. And so that, I was just curious, like, it's like one of these, it's the weirdest thing that's happened to me with a very reputable company, and I did handle it, but I'm just curious on what your reaction and like.
I always like to pause with a lot of silence and make the other person on the other end feel the uncomfortableness. And I might have pushed back and said, well, tell me a little bit more about why you think that, and put it back into their court. But then as they're answering you, thinking, I do not want to land, especially if that's going to be my direct manager or something like that. It just, or the dynamics where they're not in alignment, because if we were all 3 doing that and one of us came up with something like that, we probably would have looked at each other to try to compensate for this, the statement that was made.
Yeah, and then,
No, you're good.
I was just gonna say, to play a little bit of devil's advocate, this situation sounds like outside of what I'm gonna like describe in this next scenario, but I sometimes have hiring managers who are traveling so much. Sometimes their only availability is in the airport, and sometimes that's the only time it aligns with the candidate. But me as a recruiter, I will be stating to the candidate, if you hear background noise, or if like for some reason they're slightly delayed, it is because of X, Y, and Z. So I think there's a difference between like somebody, like you said, kind of going rogue in this interview versus like if you are prepared and knowing and comfortable with the interviewer being in this space, because it's the only time that aligns. So I just want to put that out there too.
Absolutely. We're going to pass over here. And then I think Jessica had one in the back. We'll do Jessica, Kyle, and then online. I'll call it a day.
I have a question about if you have like a small like gaps in your resume. Like it used to be a thing where you don't talk about kids or, COVID happened and your kids were young and you took some time. But how do you answer that? And especially sometimes it's easier like with the HR, the first rounds of interviews, but then when you get to like the technical and I'm from, like engineering and quality and a lot and software, and a lot of men are interviewing me. How detailed do you get? Do you not? And how do you answer that question about the gap?
I was going to say, you go.
I was just gonna say, this is the timeline story. This is what the schedule looks like. And it's okay to say, and for, from 2023 to 2024, I took a break. I was project manager for my household. Did you ever manage, my husband and my children and, that sort of thing. So I think it's okay to go ahead and talk that track. I think it's a shame if we don't take into consideration that people are actually human and they have lives outside of, their professional world.
Yeah, and I know, I hear what you're saying though about, you're interviewing with men who've never had that expectation. And I will just say that is a problem. And I think, I know we've hired some folks who did have gaps, substantial gaps, stayed home for 10 years or something. But I've hired some of those individuals and they are amazing. Do you know why? They have been managing chaos 24/7 versus, hey, I've been in the workforce where I can like put it down and go home, right? So just use some of those examples of that to leverage why you're even better.
Cool. We are going to do a couple more questions. However, I am going to interview really quickly because it is 2:00. So if you had a 2:00 interview, which is, let me check. Crystal, Vipul, Raquel, Ellen, Yusil, Christine, and Shalom, please head on out. Chase just walked to the back. She's going to show you where you're going. If you are offering an interview, I think they're all in there, so you should be good. But yes, head over that way. And Crystal, do you need my sheet? Okay, I'm gonna run the sheet up, but we are gonna go to Kyle and then Jessica, and then we will do online questions. Oh, perfect, thank you. Go for it, you're good.
Oh, all right, thank you. So panel for the Q&A and for fielding questions from the audience. Thank you for your time today and for NCBiotech for putting this event on. And little side bit, I'm also from the Midwest as well. I actually transplanted from Ohio with the rest of my family just earlier this year. So it's actually one of the driving factors in attending these events. I actually left my job of 3.5 years to focus full-time on networking down here. That's how serious I am about transitioning into life sciences. So thank you. So my question actually stems from, I want to go back to a statement, Denise, that you had made earlier. It was something along the lines of, don't just get a job to get a job, which is, that resonates with me, especially in this climate. And I think it's, not to speak for everyone else, but at least for me, it's one I could definitely stand to meditate on a bit more with all the different, positions out there. I guess what I want to do is my question is about finding the medium between, not just throwing a wide net, but also not restricting your search too much. Like for me, especially, I love research. I have a strong research background. R&D engineering positions in medical devices, they typically are very competitive from my experience. So I've been expanding my search essentially. So what's some advice and this is to the whole panel as well.
Well, a couple of things. I think sometimes we get to a certain point in our career where we're like, I'm not going to take a step back. That's not what I want to do, because then, I won't be able to move up as quickly or whatever. But I would encourage people who come with jobs, kind of back to the veterans, back to the people who have job experience and all of that, to recognize that sometimes you have to take a step back to get your foot in the door. But then the next thing that happens is everyone does recognize that how much experience you actually bring to the table and your capabilities, and then you can accelerate up through that company potentially, or organization or whatever. That's just some advice that I have, because I've seen it and I've watched it. And some of that is networking too, but it's not always networking to get the top job, because sometimes the top job is somebody else they've groomed in the company to take that position. So just understand a little bit of that. And then I think what you're doing is great as far as saying, you know what, this is what I want personally. It's kind of like back to what Jordan was saying, is that self-reflection. So I would, keep it up.
Awesome. We're going to do our one last question with Jessica in the back, who has had her hand up for a while, and then we will close.
Thanks again for being here today. So my question is adjacent to interviewing, but it's for someone like myself. I'm from USAID, so I'm a non-traditional candidate, and I've applied to a couple of jobs in this sector with a referral. How do we get through the screening process? Like, as an HR person, are you looking for someone like myself, like as a project manager, for example? How do we get through the first hurdle to then get to the screening interview and then the actual interview itself? I don't know, like my main question is, are you discussing amongst your teams that you want someone non-traditional, or someone that has relevant experience I'd love to hear your response. Thanks.
So I have a multitude of things that I want to kind of go through. So I know we talked about AI. I can speak for myself. We don't use AI to review applicants. I just want to be very clear. Like, that is, I know that's been a concern that's been brought up multiple times. In a lot of conversations that I've been having, a human is going through and looking at the required skills on the role and then finding that similarity and that comparable experience on your resume. And referrals are amazing. Each company, I think, has different referral programs and policies, so I can only speak to my experience. But a lot of times with referrals, those are individuals that were saying, hey, hiring manager, so-and-so referred this candidate, here is their resume. I'll be setting up a screen, or what are your thoughts? So again, we do really look at referrals because it's a great, number one, program within our company. And then number two, a lot of times referrals are amazing hires. Not to say there's a lot of amazing hires across the board, but having someone to be able to advocate for you is really important. To get past that hurdle, I truly am going to say it again, it is a networking piece of just knowing which lever and which person to kind of pull into the conversation. And it also does come down to timing. So every single situation, there's so many different variables. So there's not a one size fit all, but I think it is continuing to take everything we discussed today, look at your resume in comparison to the job description, going through that referral process and networking. Not going to say it's going to change tomorrow, but that's going to be the foundation that helps you get that next step.
I was just going to say one more thing related to that is we get hundreds of applications to one job. And I'm speaking specifically about a clinical research coordinator. So just a number of years ago, not too long ago, post-COVID, we had the Great Resignation, right? We had about 7 resumes for one job, maybe. Okay. We're up around 200 for one CRC job. And this is a big, this is a hot market, if you will, not so hot for the jobs right now because we're all competing for the same thing. So that getting to the person who's doing the hiring is part of it. We won't even get those 200 sent over to the hiring manager, right? It's going through the recruiter, filtering system. I've been trying to meet with recruitment at Duke in my space, clinical research, right? To say, here's what's going on in clinical research right now. I suspect, and I don't want to be short-sighted, so I suspect that the pendulum will swing back to the other direction where we will have more funding and things will continue to do this. And then we're going to have the other problem again. So let's not be short-sighted and remember that we need to bring people in of all walks of life into this like pipeline, if you will. So I'm trying to do that from my end, but part of it is also on your end to try to help us figure out why we aren't seeing your resume.
Awesome. So I'm going to do a massive thank you to our panelists. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. So, like I said, the recording will be shared, the slides will be shared, Denise's timeline slide will be shared. If you're doing a 2:15 interview, please meet me outside. Our panelists, you are welcome to hang around and ask questions, answer questions, but if you need to head, go for it. And we do still have food and all of that out there till 2:30, but thank you all so much for coming, and see you next month.
Nice to meet you.